Oh, we haven't updated the LCO page.
Oh, we're now
Yeah.
live.
Dun, da, da. Are we? No.
No?
Oh, we might be. We might be. I'm going to say we're live now. A little technical hitch there. Yes, we're on. Hello everybody. Hello, welcome to our live stream chat and concert on this wonderful 100th birthday of the London Chamber Orchestra. Thank you for tuning in, and do send your questions and say hello. Tell us where you're listening from. And with us today, you can probably see all our faces. Feels very strange, like being in the zoo, like we're being watched. We've got Freya and Cheryl Frances-Hoad and Freya Waley-Cohen, who are two of our featured composers today in the concert, and who we've worked with before. Cheryl, you've done lots of, I remember the Music Junction work particularly.
No, I've done, well, it would have been my third one, possibly tonight. I think it was due to be performed. So I think the first one, I can't remember when the first one was, years ago anyway, but yeah, so I'm on my third one now, so it's been great.
And the composition writing that you do on those projects, do you feel that is it a different sort of approach that you have than for your other compositions and creations?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. I mean, it's different to a certain degree in that, I mean, you're writing for people who, you're writing for an orchestra, you're writing for children who maybe have been playing for years, and they're maybe grade 6 or grade 8, and you're also writing for children who, at the beginning of the process, might never have seen an instrument, never have seen the instrument that they are playing. So, I mean, I love it because what I want to do as a composer in my normal work is write a piece that makes the most of the performer who's playing it. So Music Junction just takes that to a whole new level, because you want to make a piece that's more than the sum of its parts and makes the best of everybody who's performing in that piece. So there's a lot of sort of problem solving, a lot of thinking creatively. I get a lot of my ideas when I'm away from my desk for Music Junction pieces, because often it's like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to make sure that that person who's only been playing the violin for 6 months and this high achieving student who's, doing their grade 8, how am I going to make sure that they are both like satisfied and enriched and enjoy the process, as well as the orchestra enjoying it, and well as the audience enjoying it. So it was great. I mean, it adds a whole lots more fun problems to solve than normal, and
Excellent. And you're saying that you get lots of your ideas away from your desk. Freya, when do you come up with your ideas, your inspiration, I suppose? I mean, I find that very curious as a non-composer, and I feel I very much am a non-composer. I really like playing the dots that are in front of me, much safer. So I'm curious about your approaches for this. What inspires you?
That's one of the things that I feel, if I had an easy answer for it each time, then composing would be so much more easy. I don't know, for me, that's one of the things that's kind of different each time, and sometimes things come easily, and sometimes it's, you hit a wall, and that's often when you do need to get away from the desk, spend some time doing something else, and you'll come back to it and it'll be fresh and it'll be there. But I mean, I suppose reading and finding other things in other arts quite often sparks ideas that become part of my music. So that's definitely a big part of it for me.
Reading, and so literature. You're an avid reader, would you say?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a bookworm. So yeah, books, poetry, just finding ideas from other disciplines. I mean, one of the things that maybe this is unfair, but I think writers are better at writing about writing than composers are about writing about writing. So often reading what writers write about their process and about writing and how they think about ideas and what they're trying to communicate, things like that, applies quite interestingly to composers in a way that, often I feel that I then can come at it with sort of fresher eyes. But I suppose in general, I mean, I do often quite like finding ways now and then to work with or be inspired by other disciplines, because you just get that completely fresh view that questions the way that you are, like the patterns with which I'm thinking, and makes me try and come out of my own patterns and into someone else's patterns, and that helps me when I come back to write, if that makes sense. Yeah,
I find that very interesting, what you were saying about how you feel writers and composers are very different with how they can clarify their process. Does any of what Freya's been saying ring true with you as well, Cheryl?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I haven't really read much about writers writing about writing, which is which I really should do. I find actually the next thing I've got to do is write about how I write chamber music, and I'm absolutely petrified of it. I'm at the stage now where I just think in notes almost, so but in terms of inspiration, I take inspiration from literature and arts and nature, everything and anything really. I mean, I think being inspired is something that you can practice, so like if you look at a brick wall hard enough and you think hard enough about it and you think about the texture and the color, I mean, you could write a 3-movement string quartet, if you think about it hard enough and if you look long enough, so
tapping into that part of our brain that creates, and training ourselves to react.
Absolutely,
I suppose.
I love that. I've never heard anyone put it like that, but it's so true that you is something that you practice, like everything else. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I often ask myself a series of questions. I used to write them down. I don't anymore, but I literally used to write like a list of, I don't know, if I was writing a piece about a tree, I'd sort of like, what dynamic would that tree be? What articulation would that tree have? What string technique would that tree? How would you represent that tree in which string technique if it was a string quartet or something? And if anybody saw my notes, they'd wonder, what I was on, but I mean, it all sort of makes sense and it kind of triggers a load of ideas. And I find really, I've just finished a piece which is lots and lots of songs, and I found as I go through them, my inspiration it gets warmed up. So I found it, even though I was getting more tired as I went along, I was finding it easier and easier. It's like my inspiration muscles were just really warmed up, and I'd get ideas in a flash for a song while I was brushing my teeth, and then the next day would be sorted. I'd just go and write a song. That's great. But it's not always like that. It's not always like that
around
at
the
all.
house to get your notes when you have the inspiration. I find I forget if I leave it too long. It's interesting, you're talking about nature and a tree, and because of the London Chamber Orchestra's Instagram post just before all of this, I saw Freya's tag and I thought, I don't follow Freya. And there's lots of pictures of this particular tree. You seem to be obsessed with Freya. I've got to know more about this tree. What's going on?
Oh no, yeah, it's just outside my window. So it was just it just kept turning interesting colours, and I don't know.
Have you written a piece about it yet?
Not about that tree. Although I did the piece that I wrote in sort of like October, November time, December time, was called Talisman, and it's sort of about the idea of like a magical object and how like rituals and events become associated with an object that makes it seem magical to people. But also I had just read this description that Elena Ferrante wrote in this essay on plants about this idea of us sort of thinking of them as these little pretty things that stay in their pots, but actually however long it takes, they'll sort of destroy everything we make, and there's like this ferocity to them. And so that was like part of what I was writing that piece. So it was sort of secretly about trees. Yeah.
like that it's continued, this tree. Yeah, I enjoyed your posts. They seemed, your posts were, from the little scan that I did, there were lots about nature, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that a lot. We've got a couple of questions come in. So the first one, both from Bobster. I know who Bobster is. It says, Sophie, I love the art in the distance behind you. Tell us all about it. Now, this artwork, I'm so pleased you've noticed this artwork. It's huge, by the way. If I understand it, it's absolutely massive. It takes up most of our wall. It's by an artist called Hugo Max, a very young, upcoming, budding, very talented artist. And he also does all sorts of other things. I think he's very musical. He creates films. He's got a current mild obsession, might be greater, about ducks. They seem to feature a lot in his work in various ways. But this piece is from a series called the Stanley series. And Stanley features in this piece, and this is the final of the series, called Stanley Discovers Love. And I was particularly taken with the colours, and it just, I mean, I think it seems to go in the room perfectly. It's like we knew. I haven't painted any colours in this house. I mean, it's almost like we got the house for the colours. I don't know, but it just works really well. But it's got this 3D. I'm slightly attached to my headphones. I don't know how far I've got. In order to teach, I've got an extension cable on it. Let's see how far it reaches. Here you go. This is where I'm not wearing my pyjamas. I've remembered to fully dress. Shoes. So yeah, Stanley Discovers Love, but it's got this wonderful 3D aspects to it as well. I don't know if you can see that through there. Multimedia. It's rather lovely, and what I find incredibly amusing at the moment is that it seems to appeal to all ages. And my 18-month-old daughter comes in here specifically to walk in front of it and say, "Ooh." Which I find very charming. But yes, it's a wonderful addition to our house. So that's Stanley. Another question from Bobster to Cheryl. It says, please tell us about the Music Junction piece you have written for this year's project, and when can we hear it in the flesh?
I think it's being done next year. It is called The Exciting Marvellous Mars, which is a line from a poem that one of the children at one of the schools wrote. The brief, I think, was the planets, because it was going to be in a reduced orchestration of the planets. It was going to be in the same concert as the planets. And so it was around the time that Perseverance was travelling to Mars. So I got very, very excited about this. And so my piece is all about Perseverance getting to Mars, and I completed it before Perseverance had got to Mars. So I just sort of prayed that it didn't sort of crash and burn up in the atmosphere. But the first movement is inspired by the liftoff. That's very, very sort of very, very joyous. The second movement is about Odyssey, which is the Perseverance is a rover, and Odyssey, it's not a satellite, but it's going round and round Mars, and that's been up in space for 20 years. And the wonderful thing about Perseverance's arrival is that Odyssey and Perseverance will together, they'll give us lots of information about Mars that we never knew before. The last movement, I mean, this was at a time where I think LCO was still planning to do the performance, and it was going to be online, but this was before schools were shut and it just became impossible, I think. So added on to all the usual complications and things, there was the fact that the workshops were going to be shorter than usual, that people wouldn't be able to get together. So actually the last movement is new for me, in that as many children as wanted to wrote poems about Mars, and I received this fabulous email full of poems, and I made a found poem, ensuring that I included a line from everybody's poem, which is then going to be spoken, and it's got sort of like an orchestral accompaniment underneath it. So the original plan was that this would be able to be done online, and people, so because the children weren't allowed to sing at that time, so we see children reading their poem, and it will be accompanied by the orchestra, but it can also be done live. Yeah, it's very exciting. I mean, there's lots of things you think about when you're doing Music Junction. You want to give everybody a chance to be creative, so there's an improvisatory aspect. So in the movement about Odyssey, everybody has to come up with their own space sounds with their instruments. You want to give everybody something to learn. So, you know, something that literally involves remembering what fingers you put down. And, you know, even if it's something simple like only using the first finger. So just something like that I have written that they have to learn and remember. So that's really, there's a lot of that in the first movement. And what I really wanted to do is that the whole point, it was very exciting that it might have been done this year, but really it's better that it's being postponed, because the whole point of this project is that I wanted every child who played in it to get that overwhelming experience of playing with the orchestra on a stage, which just wouldn't have happened if it had all been put together online and done how so many concerts have been done. So there's always a bit where everybody gets a chance to play the big tune. So whether that's your grade 6 performers who can play the whole tune, or whether that's your beginners who can maybe play just open strings, but everybody feels like they are playing the big tune of the piece. So in my score, there's sort of like, in this bit with the big tune, there's 3 versions. There's sort of like the tune, and then there's a simpler version of the tune, and there's an even simpler version of the tune. But the point is that everybody is playing, and so they can feel part of this big orchestra, and so hopefully get that real sort of wow factor. But it's it's really exciting, and I'm just glad that Perseverance has been such an success, you know. So thank you, NASA.
Right, the ending otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's curious. You say this about using open strings for some of the easier parts. Does that in a way steer you towards writing in a certain key then?
Yeah. I mean, basically you've got so I was going through my husband's beginner clarinet and saxophone books, you know, working out which note, you know, because it's for the very beginners you are limited. So you're let's just say there's a lot of G major and B flat major in this piece, because it gives everybody. So it's sort of like doing a puzzle. So like if I'm in G major, the violinist can pluck or play the G string, and then if my trumpets and clarinets are playing in B flat, then my violins can play the D string, because some people who've maybe not got around to being able to play a B flat at least can play a note. So it's sort of, I don't know, it's some like huge I don't know, musical Sudoku or something, but it gets your brain working in a very interesting way, especially when sort of about 3/4 of the way through the piece one school suddenly tells you that they've only got a load of E flat saxophones, so then you have to work out what notes that they can play. But it's
quite a beast
it's
to
fun.
put together, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's but it's great fun, because I think, and it's really, you know, that sense of you know, it's just that wow factor of playing in an orchestra and being part of something. And it's if you can do that successfully, you know, it's really really great.
Yeah, I have a question for Freya before we move on. I know we've got another question, but it's for Cheryl again. So I'd like to ask Freya if you feel drawn to certain keys or instruments when you're composing. Has there been a sort of recurring love of something through your composition?
I'm not sure. I don't know that I'm particularly drawn to specific keys, although I suppose even without the need for it because of the educational purposes. Often string writing, like I will sort of tend toward passages which sit well within the instrument's natural sort of open string sort of space. I don't think so. I've actually never thought about that.
How do you go about choosing a key for? I mean, do you even write in a particular key? When
I don't normally think of myself as writing
it like that.
Yeah, I don't normally think of myself as writing in particular keys, although passages of my music will definitely inhabit different keys. But yeah, I generally don't come to it from that angle.
Where's your starting point often for a composition from inception?
In terms of notes, do you mean, or just
in terms of anything from concept? Does it come from? I mean, I guess it would be different whether it's something that you're writing for yourself that you've got a desire to create, or that it's been commissioned. I suppose it's different.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there hasn't been much in the last. Most of what I've written in the last however many years has been for commissions, although it's commissions that I want to write. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. But I feel like each one comes from a different inspiration. Recently, a lot of my pieces have come from sort of ideas around myth making and magic and the occult, which sort of came out of reading a book called Witch by Rebecca Tamash, which is a poetry book, which reimagines the concept of the witch from her own perspective. And it really kind of changed my thinking about storytelling and how the stories, the myths that we tell our children and ourselves, and that are sort of the cornerstones of our society in some ways, tell us how to be and often don't necessarily still serve our society now, and how there's so much room to play and reinvent there. So a lot of my works recently have been exploring that idea, which is also tied up with spells and rituals and things like that, which ritualistic nature, which can change the pacing of a piece and the way it repeats. So I suppose that from saying that, the answer is it often comes from an idea that's maybe a little bit seems like it's further from the music, but to me has quite a strong musical pull. Like, for example, I've been writing this song cycle of spells based on some of Rebecca's poems, which, the concept of a spell is something that's highly formalized and ritualized, and the idea that the words, movement, sounds would sort of somehow reach out into the world and change something. So that's for me a really sort of strong starting point. And then it's a combination of often I come to each of these songs or a piece and I have been told, if not an exact instrumentation, as sort of this is what sort of instruments we've got and this is the duration it's going to be. And even if there might be some flexibility to work that out with the ensemble or commissioner, that gives me the parameters, and then I start sort of hearing things from within that, if that makes sense. So the colors of what the instruments are going to be, the sort of narrative or story that I want to tell, if it's that sort of a piece, or the type of pacing that I want to explore are often starting points for me recently.
And is it very, very different working now with mostly commissions than before when you were studying? Were you more, I guess, free? It's not really the right word for it. I think probably as a composer, I'm hoping that you do feel free, but like you're saying that there's a set guideline with either duration or instrumentation. Is that very different to when you were studying and did you have more free reign?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, there's often been like a balance in my sort of life and career so far, in that there'll be, even while I was studying, works that you are this is the project you're going to do, these are the performers, because there is a practical aspect of being a composer. You need the performers to be there and gonna play it before that it makes sense for you to write it, unless you're going to do something like, let's say, a piano piece that you could get any number of people to do. But then also there's things where I've instigated them, and in some ways that continues. For example, I'm like co-founder of Listen Pony, which is a concert series, and every year I would have the option to write for some of those. So if there's something that I'm really aching to write, or someone I'm really aching to write for, it's sort of an option there for me to play with, and that sort of opens that sort of space of more personal exploration for me. But I like the parameters of it's going to be these instruments and that sort of thing, and I'm sure Cheryl would say the same. If the parameters don't work for you, then probably you're not going to find a way to make it work with that particular person who's approaching you. But I think there's got to be a balance between the self-instigated things that you decide, okay, this is going to be this thing that I really have been thinking about for years. I mean, there are some projects which I really spent years making sure they happened, and there's a certain type of energy you've got to have to do that, and it's different from just the energy of composing. And then there's other projects which it's just really nice to be told, hey, here you go, here's a nice ensemble, do your worst. Yeah.
So we've got 3 questions I'm going to deal with, and the last one actually seems the most relevant, and I'll pose it to both of you. Question from Edward. And he asks, what would be your dream commission? I love this song.
Crikey. I think an opera. I'd love to write an opera. Yeah. I mean, I've already written one, but I'd like to write another one, and I'd like to write a bigger one. Yes, I'd like one of those, or a cello concerto, or a violin concerto.
There we go, then,
or a
Edward.
viola concerto, or any form of concerto.
Maybe he's set to commission one. There it is. It's going to happen. Yeah. And Freya, what about you?
I'm actually currently in the middle of writing my first opera, so I would have said that before this. So if I look a little bit sort of dazed, that's what I know. I mean, it's going to sound very unoriginal. Also, concertos. My fiance is a pianist, and I would love to write a concerto for him. My sister is a violinist, and I'd love to write a concerto for her, partially because, I would also just generally love to write concertos for those instruments, but the combination of writing for someone that you're so close to and a sort of medium that I'd be really excited about, that maybe those would be dream commissions. Yeah.
So having a very intimate knowledge of the player themselves as well can sometimes be a helpful and desirable aspect then, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think there's a real excitement sometimes about being asked to write for a performer that you haven't worked with before, and there's sort of like an exciting energy of of getting to know their playing, or maybe you knew their playing but not them, and that's really exciting. But the sort of things that I really hope I do, one day before I die, I really want to have written those 2 concertos for each of them. So yeah. And I think there's I'm not going to be able to remember everything now, but I think there's historical precedent of many composers having people that they are really close to, either through friendships or relationships, where there's just something particularly special about writing for them.
Yeah, totally. 2 more questions. This one is for Cheryl from Guy Button. Guy Button is one of the violinists in the orchestra, and also another Cambridge grad, which leads on to his question, really. Cheryl, you supervised me for one of Ruth Davis's courses at university. I remember you once saying that you were taking part in a scientific study where you were going to have a psychosis induced. How did that go?
Great. It was really great.
I think we need a little bit more, Cheryl, to be honest.
I'm not sure how many. I'm not sure how much. Like, this is fully supervised and in Addenbrooke's. Yeah, I think I must have been at the time. My goodness, at the time I was Leverhulme composer in residence at the psychiatry department. Yeah, one of the many sort of slightly random things I've done because of fascination and interest, but also because of finances. And I spent a year shadowing a team investigating early onset psychosis. It was absolutely fascinating. And I mean, a lot of it went over my head, but I mean, it was a real privilege to be party to this really cutting edge research into something that is such a, you know, I mean, the group that they were studying were young men. You know, I think it's when early onset psychosis first appears, and these people doing really, really important work. And it was quite, I wrote a piece of music actually at the end of this process, and it was premiered by Alistair Beatson at the neuroscience conference, and what for me, one of the best things about being a composer. I mean, I'm really poorly educated because I went to a specialist music school, so I have 2 A levels, of which I didn't get my grades to get into university. So I gave up science when I was 13 because I was composing and stuff. So, and here's me who literally doesn't have science GCSE, getting to spend time with these world-class scientists, you know, and you just get to learn so much. And I mean, a lot of it. I mean, I remember sitting through a presentation on sort of rapid eye movements and literally not understanding most of the words in each of the sentences, but you get something, and it's just such an incredible privilege, and it does make you sometimes it's just fascinating, but sometimes it will make you look at your work in a different way. And it's often, I often think that it's all one way, that like all these, you know, fabulous people are giving me lots of information and inspiration, but I think sort of scientists and other experts do get something from working with musicians as well. And one of my favourite stories is that I wasn't there, but I wrote a piece inspired by plankton, and it was performed on the quay. It was in a documentary about Darwin's boat, and I can't remember where, some fabulous Spanish place, and apparently it reduced a plankton scientist to tears because she'd never heard a song. But the actual experiments I took, so I was the test subject for the early onset psychosis tests, which involved me taking certain substances in a highly supervised environment, and it was I remember reading Beowulf while having these certain substances ramped up to quite high levels in my bloodstream, and it was, I can't lie, it was absolutely fabulous. and I'd like to do it again, but it was a long time ago, and lots of my close relatives don't know about it, so I'll shut up.
They might now.
Yeah,
Oh,
but,
brilliant.
yeah.
Gosh, that's
a bit of a tangent.
Marvelous. And there's another question here. It's to all of us. It's from Gary. It says, to all of you, what makes the LCO so good to work with? Freya?
So lots of things, just the sort of generally warm, lovely people who work there, and getting to talk to them and talk to them about ideas and projects. Also, just the standard of the orchestra and how sort of fantastic all the players are. And also, I think it's sort of quite an imaginative orchestra in the sort of projects it undertakes and the sort of ideas it encompasses. But I also have to say that I've only had one of my pieces played by the orchestra before, And this is my first time having written something new for the orchestra. So I'm sort of at the beginning of my LCO journey.
Welcome. There's a follow-on actually that's just come through for Freya from Fiona. It says, "What is your role in tonight's concert?" So this is very specific to this is your beginning journey. So tell us a little bit more about the composition in tonight's concert that you've written.
Oh yeah, so there's I think it's at the end of the concert. There's a piece. There's a piece which is actually 7 pieces written by different composers, and each of them is very sort of short and snappy and celebratory. And mine is the second one. But I also, which is written for Pekka Kusistu, absolutely fabulous violinist. But I also had the sort of second role of, I suppose, designing how those pieces were going to fit together. So deciding what order they were going to go in, how they were going to move between each other, which was fun. Yeah. And in some way, some of the answers to that, once I saw the pieces, were surprisingly obvious. So
how so?
Well, Cheryl's piece just had to finish it. It's just so clearly the sort of finale of the set, and John Rutter's just had to start it. It was just so clearly the introduction. So that was, the sort of normal question of like, all right, where are we going to start? What's going to end it? Like, absolutely no question marks there. So, and
if anyone disagrees, well,
yeah, you can write.
I suppose now write to Freya. Exactly, it's really clear. No, I like that, and I didn't know that you were also involved in that element of it. That's really great. What other further insight into piecing it all together like that? Which leaves me, I guess I've forgotten to answer it to all of you. What makes the LCO so good to work with? The LCO was the first professional orchestra I worked with, and I think for that reason it holds a very special place to me in my career and my I don't know, feelings towards it a little bit. But I think I was very lucky that they were the first orchestra. Makes it a follow-on pretty hard. Honest answers. What makes them so great? We can say everything, can't we? I think it has a very special relationship for all of us as colleagues. We absolutely want to do every concert. We love to be there. Probably even more so now with the lack of playing, the lack of concerts and contact with each other. But as examples, that during this last difficult year that everyone's been through, I know that there's an LCO WhatsApp group and fitness class. It's great, right? These are other totally unexpected elements that we find out, and every single day through lockdown, I believe, there have been various members of the orchestra that hold a different sort of fitness class, whether that's like a HIIT training or yoga, Pilates, every day, including Sundays. They're hardcore, this lot. It's, I think you'll understand from that the dedication, like beyond the music, beyond the playing, but to the friendships and the support to each other. And the genuine love we feel, being together and creating that, and the respect for each other and our personalities and talents, and I'm not going to embarrass people by naming names, but I think some of my very favourite people play in this orchestra, and it's a joy to turn up to work with them. And I think Freya touched on it. I can't remember exactly what you were saying, but to me it sort of made me think about how the orchestra, I feel it's very free to create and give a personality to pieces, and I feel very free as a player under Chris's baton, and that's a joy, doing what we do, sitting in a section playing the same notes as people around us, but yet feeling free to create in your own way is special. So yeah, it's beyond the playing and beyond the orchestra, to everyone in the office and who we are, and that we know each other. I think everybody knows each other. It's a small community. I could gush for hours about us all, but I mean it. It's not just that we're here on the chat for this marvelous 100th birthday we've got, and that maybe they're paying us to say this. No, I think we genuinely feel this way. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers it, Gary. Yeah, hope so. So it's a minute and a bit, I reckon, to the concert. So for information as to how to find and watch it, you go either back to the lco.co.uk website, our London Chamber Orchestra website, where there should be a new button to click to watch the concert. I think you can also find it on YouTube, but not on Facebook now. So the best place to go to is the website to see Freya's piece and Cheryl's piece and the other 5 composers and many, many more. I think it's going to be a feast, a delightful feast tonight, and I'm looking forward to it myself. So thank you, Freya. Thank you, Cheryl. It's been lovely seeing your faces, big fat gleaming kisses, and wonderful to listen to you and chat. So yeah, I'll see you soon, I hope, and look forward to the concert.